So I received a comment the other day. This guy's stuff is usually on point, but he seems to think that BDSM is the devil and the root of all evil. He only thinks his kind of sex is the right kind of sex, and all the other kinds of sex are wrong. So I decided to answer this comment because I received a few similar comments before. So the first thing to get out of the picture is that I've only made videos on rough sex. If you interpreted from my videos on rough sex that I'm talking about BDSM, then you need to brush up on the difference between BDSM and rough sex, and you need to know that difference in order to practice BDSM correctly. So I will rephrase your comment to make it more accurate. This guy thinks that rough sex and BDSM are the root of all evil, and he only thinks that his kind of sex is correct and the other kinds of sex are wrong. So I am a sex educator. I've been doing it for years. I'm not a social media personality. I have spent my life researching sex, teaching it, seeing results, collecting data from people I worked with. And my priority is not to like something and then get everybody else to like it. It is to try the best I can to help people to develop their sex life to where it can give them a maximum enrichment and fulfillment, can make their relationships stronger. So when I teach things, it's not what I like, it is what I believe. As a professional, I'm allowed to believe and to have opinions. I'm never judgmental to what people do in their life on a personal level, unless they basically expose themselves as assholes to their partner. I'm a human being, I will comment on that. I have an expansive attitude. I think, people can practice everything and enjoy a bit of everything. I think it's useful to have a sense of priority of what kind of sex gives you the most, what are different kinds of sex about. However, I accept that I am quite judgmental about certain cultural trends and the kind of information that spreads, because it is not about people. This is about the self-interest of the parties behind that. And as a sex educator, I reflect on the impact that ideas can have on people and their relationships. And they often actually get people to do things that are not actually what they really want, but they feel pressured or they feel misinformed. So I do call out ideas, but not people. I would challenge the idea that rough sex is, as such, a taste in most cases, or a preference, like, people choose. I think for a lot of people currently, it's a cultural phenomenon that has been imposed on them and they have been pushed into directly or subconsciously. There is definitely no research to say that, we are born with certain sexual tastes. There are some suggestions that some personality traits might lead to certain sexual tastes later in life. In fact, there are grounds to say that possibly all sexual tastes are acquired. They're not inborn. So typically it happens in your teenage years. A lot of it can happen before that as well. The background, the culture, most of all exposure, association with something that happened or something you saw. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand, that you don't just come with a taste, you have picked it up somewhere. Now, in the olden days, your sexual tastes would have been formed by some of your first experiences, something sexual that was in your environment, whatever, through natural life events. But these days, obviously, where are most sexual tastes formed during the teenage years? Well, they are formed by the two guys with a camera who decided to make a buck by setting up a porn website. So the sexual tastes that most men end up with, they're not your chosen tastes. They're the tastes that those two guys with a camera chose for you, and they conditioned you to it. And then it was reinforced by, all the media and social media that basically works, on very similar mechanism. And then it's reinforced by you having experiences with partners who also have been conditioned in a similar place. So you're both reinforcing each other. I'm not saying that this is the way it happens for everybody, but this is a very, very common pattern these days. So your sexual tastes, they are not actually, tastes, they are your sexual conditioning. And what's more important is that we can change our sexual tastes. Neuroscience has already sufficiently shown this, the different brain areas where your sexual experience basically exists, and those areas and the links between them can be rewritten. And I've seen this many times in my practice with the people that I worked with over the last 2 decades. People come with all sorts of random stuff that seems to be working for them in sex, but then I give them a different vision, I give them a different practice, they try it, they get better at it, and they might say, I really love this, I love this so much more than what I was doing before. So a new taste has been formed from having a different vision and having a different practice, and then then reinforcing that with experiences and learning to feel it. So I really, really would like everybody to reflect that, you can change your sexual tastes, because otherwise, it's not a growth mindset. If you just think, this is my taste, this is what I like, that's what I need to look for. You don't need to stick to that. You can grow, you can develop, and you can discover a much better experience for yourself. So I really recommend people to have self-reflection. What actually makes sense to you? What do you think you want to feel in sex? What do you think would really make you happy? Because then you can create it. You can create anything you want. This is your life. Now, the phenomenon of rough sex for me, because I'm not talking about passionate sex, I'm not talking about hard sex, I'm not talking about intense sex, I'm not talking about BDSM. I'm talking about rough sex specifically, where you are exhibiting elements of aggressiveness, or violently treating the body of your partner with violent elements, with the idea that you both enjoy it and you both get some pleasure from it, of course. The phenomenon of rough sex for me is not the devil. It is degradation. It is not personal degradation, it is cultural degradation that is affecting people. Where we live in a culture that is not promoting relational and loving ways of having sex, it is promoting a consumerist attitude to sex, and it tries, in every way through social media to manipulate our basic impulses for a quick fix, for engagement, for commercial gain. I am against the proliferation of rough sex as the main form of intimacy we are going to take up. I believe if we are not careful, it can end up there. I take a stand that we can evolve in a much better and more enriching for us direction. So it's not that my kind of sex is the right kind of sex and the other kinds of sex are wrong. Actually, I don't even dismiss rough sex. I think that people can practice everything, a little bit of everything in their life. If they see it for what it is, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of thrill. I always tell people I'm going to teach you really enriching kind of sex that really satisfies you as a human being and your relationship, and then you can add to it whatever you want. And my take on rough sex will be helpful to understand if we see sex as basically nourishing your relationship with something. In sex, you are creating the feelings and the energy between you through your bodies. You are really impacting and affecting your bodies and your psyche through the bodies. So everything in sex is a substance. And the substance that you are generating in sex then goes into your relationship. So basically, you are putting things into your relationship through sex frequently, for years and years. So the question is, what are we putting into our relationships? What are we nourishing our relationships with? Because what you feed your relationship with is what it is going to become. That's common sense, right? It just makes sense to me that if we make sex a really, really powerful experience of that bodily nourishment, of, really intense physical love, powerful, not flimsy, powerful, real blissfulness, lots of energies that feel really enriching to us, sexual energies. And there is a lot of care and a lot of love that we are sharing through our bodies. Then all of that is going to be nutrients that are fertilizing our relationship. And, our relationships will benefit from it. So I think these are relatively universal human values that we want to experience in our relationships. And to feed our relationships, we need to create those values. Sex is a really, really powerful influence on you. It's a really powerful event. It really goes so far into our personal well-being, the well-being of our relationships. It's a huge thing, hugely influential. It can hugely damage somebody or really enrich somebody. And it's because I know this as a sex educator. And I believe that everybody really needs to sort out their sex life, whichever way works for them. Just sex is really important, really influential. Because of that, I am so passionate about what exactly we are putting into our relationships. I'm not talking about passionate sex. I'm not talking about hard sex. I'm talking about rough sex specifically, violently treating the body of your partner with violent elements. It doesn't matter that it is consensual. We understand that this is consensual. However, the substance that's being exchanged is still violence. That is what's being felt. That is what's being expressed from you. You're trying to be this violent lover to, make your partner hot. They are absorbing that violence into their body, into their psyche. And yes, you like it, but that doesn't mean anything, because we know that we are fascinated by violence. We like violence. That is the truth. From the days of the Colosseum to, violent video games and violent movies, we are fascinated by violence. We are aroused by violence, not just in the sexual sense, but in the sense of the psychological arousal. So there's nothing new about us liking violence, and that doesn't mean much. You know, you can say, I like porn. Porn makes me feel good. So what? You know, the way it makes you feel good is in a particular way, through a particular mechanism, with a particular fallout and particular consequences, and perhaps not in the way that, you know, you would ideally like to feel good, right? It simply makes sense to me that if we really nourish our relationships with blissfulness and nourishment and love and care through the body physically, and rich sexual energies that are not violent, but, you know, the whole other frequency, then it's going to give more to yourself as a human being, to how you're going to feel in life, to your, you know, deep, profound happiness and the quality of your relationship. Then if your form of physical intimacy with the person that you love is the consistent practice of violence through the body. Now, I understand that you're going to get something from it. I just don't believe that through practicing physical violence, you are going to get the same nutrients for yourself and for your relationship. Before even going into my data as a professional who has worked with these ideas for a long time, on a simple human level, I think everybody can relate. If I give you the choice, what would you like to put into your relationship? What do you think is going to be the most beneficial for your relationship? On one hand, physical love. On the other hand, physical violence. What is going to do more for your relationship and for your well-being as a person? And it is perhaps that people don't realize that, you know, sex is a substance that is going into you, into your system, into your relationship. And I firmly believe that a really powerful practice of loving sex is going to give a lot more to your relationship than a consistent practice of violence in sex. And I'm not even going into the area of how damaging it might be. I'm not saying it's going to be damaging. I'm not saying it's going to be toxic. I'm not making that claim, but maybe it can be damaging. Let's reflect if we are constantly feeding our relationship by, you know, arousing sexually violent feelings in me, by putting sexual violence into the nervous system of my partner all the time. There will be that part of, you know, fascination and a thrill that we get from violence, but, you know, what else? You know, it's not an intellectual agreement. You have to understand, it is real feelings through the body, and the body feels. The body is receiving a substance, and the substance goes into the psyche, and that is, you know, like what you're left with. Can we assume that it might make it more difficult for some people to relate to another person with, you know, care and compassion and love, and get desensitized from it? Can we assume that it might manifest somehow in the relationship, that it will bring a different vibe into the relationship on some level than, you know, a consistently loving sex life? Can we assume that perhaps some people will become desensitized and unable to form loving relationships, or there will be other changes that, you know, will happen somewhere deep in the psyche? You know, I think sometimes, I don't want to be pessimistic or anything, but sometimes I look around this world and I think, and there are lots of challenges much bigger than sex and much bigger problems. But at the same time, I think, what would have happened if for the last 20 years people practiced really loving sex? If they funneled a lot of physical love into their system over the last 20 years, and if everybody had done it at the same time, if there was some kind of a convention that the whole world must do it, you know, I wonder, would the world be in some way different now? And at the same time, I wonder, well, what will happen if for the next 40 years we all practice sexual violence as our primary form of intimacy with the person that we love the most, and what we take into ourselves in, you know, our most vulnerable, our most intimate space is going to be just a consistent practice of violence to our bodies? What effect will that have on the world, on how we are with each other, how we live in this world? And then I think, of course, well, maybe it has been happening for the last 10 years, and maybe, you know, some of what we are seeing around does have to do with that in the way people are. And this is not very far-fetched, because I really firmly believe that people are really deeply affected by their sexuality. We know this, really. So it's not that, you know, my kind of sex is the right kind of sex and the other kinds of sex are wrong. In fact, I have a rule, if you have noticed on this channel, I never teach the kind of sex that I like. I never teach from my personal experience of sex, because what works for me might just be working for me like this. So I think in any area, everybody should teach from not their personal experience what worked for them, but from, you know, data, a sufficient number of people they worked with. So I only teach from the experience of my clients, and not just one or two, but, you know, something that consistently worked. And I teach what I believe, in my professional opinion, to be the most enriching, the most effective kind of sex for people who want to love each other, who want to be together, who want to maintain their relationship, and who want to get the most enrichment from sex for their body, for their soul, for their heart. I am allowed my professional opinion. Everybody's got a professional opinion. Everybody takes a position. It is actually common in every scientific field, even in very objective ones, to have different camps, different schools of thought. Sometimes they oppose each other completely, but they don't call each other, ignorant or unprofessional. They just stand on different opinions. But there is a theory and background and data to it. And in sex, which is a little bit more subjective, sex is really malleable and it can be created, and you can create whatever you want out of sex. So if this is the vision you want, you can learn to make it and it will be your reality. So I don't think that rough sex is the devil. Well, actually, that's a really interesting play on words, because the devil, in the exoteric sense, people understand by it the creature with horns who is evil and corrupts human souls. But in most religions and spiritual traditions, the idea of the devil esoterically is symbolism for our most basic unconscious impulses and self-delusion that separates us from the truth of us. Just like the word sin, I believe, is translated literally as off target, meaning off target from the truth. So maybe in some sense there is some truth to your statement if we think about the word devil really esoterically like this. I am against the proliferation of rough sex as the main form of intimacy we are going to take up. I believe if we are not careful, it can end up there. I take a stand that we can evolve in a much better and more enriching for us direction with the kind of sex that is not violent, and if we develop it, is going to give us a lot more than rough sex. That is just my professional opinion. This is what I believe. I stand for promoting loving sex in the world. The landscape is a lot more complicated than it is probably for you. I don't mean to be patronizing to you, but as a sex educator, I see a lot of moving forces and influences that people are receiving and the impact they have. So I don't support the opinion that it's just a matter of taste and preferences. Like I've just explained, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And there are a lot of cultural influences that are forcing people into having rough sex, either by pressuring them through social media or as a workaround because they are, misinformed, they're disconnected from being able to reach for a different version of sex. I will do all I can to propose an alternative version that I believe to be more enriching. I stand for it. I believe in it. I can't accept a position that rough sex is going to be just as good for you and your relationship as really powerful loving sex. For the reasons I've explained, I simply cannot accept that. It's like you would ask a personal trainer to evaluate different methods, equally, when in his awareness one method is more effective than another to bring you to your well-being and health. I would not tell people that having rough sex is wrong. I would not say that it should be illegal. I think the cultural trend of pushing people into rough sex is wrong. I'm not hoping to convert hardcore rough sex practitioners into my kind of sex. They do what they do, but there are a lot of people on the fence in the middle who don't really deeply want to do it, but they feel pushed and pressured into it, or otherwise they feel like they don't have any other option. And I'm going to do my best to stand for them. So when I have good men come to my channel and they have an awareness in themselves that they don't want sex to be about violently treating a woman, they want sex to be about expression of love and the feeling of love in sex, but they are pressured by social media, by their partners, to convert themselves into violent lovers, to express that violence from themselves, because that supposedly is, how to be a good lover, and let's not pretend that that is not happening. Then yes, I will support them, I will motivate them, I will tell them to not go and do violent sex because it's being asked of you. I will motivate them to hold on to their truth, to the kind of sex that they want to create. And I will do my best to equip them with everything they need to create a powerful experience out of that, for themselves and for the woman, and I have a firm conviction that is going to give them a lot more than rough sex. And that's my professional opinion and a position that I take in my profession. It's not the kind of sex that I like, and therefore I think everybody should be having it. Now with the BDSM, I'm not going to say a lot on BDSM, but since you commented that I think BDSM is the devil, I definitely don't think that BDSM is the devil. I don't think there's anything wrong with practicing BDSM. I don't promote it. I also don't criticize it. What I teach is not incompatible or confrontational with BDSM. When we are talking about proper BDSM, not what you commented on, that you're confusing rough sex with BDSM. With something like BDSM, you're going to have esoteric core of the practitioners who do it really properly, and profoundly, and then you're going to have an exoteric mass. I've worked with a lot of people who are into BDSM, and they also really appreciated what I have taught them, because it developed a completely different part of their sex life that is also really, really meaningful to them. I do have, if I'm totally honest, I do have some criticism on the positioning of BDSM in our culture. I think it is let's say it this way, overrated. And that's also a historical phenomenon that I will explain in one of the videos, you know, the place that BDSM took that should have probably been taken by, you know, a variety of things, not just BDSM.